Okay, we're back again, and we're here again at allpointstv.com. We are glad to be back another week. We're glad to be anywhere another week, and we're glad to see you out there. All the lights up and running as always, and the sound technicians are doing their job. The camera people, they are on their post, and they're pointing at me and telling me that it's time to get started. We are back again here, allpointstv.com. My name is George Moss, and we do the program that comes on Monday from 2 to 3, and the program is called What's Going On. Took that title, by the way, from the great Marvin Gaye that was asking what's going on, and we hope you're finding out more about what's going on, about what we do here, and if not, don't call and make any complaints. I don't want to get fired.
But usually, yeah, I remember we used to play that song before we got hit up, for the copyright infringement thing. But if you listen to it, it was a real relevant song because it was talking about the political scene at that time. And I definitely think Marvin Gaye, I don't think he'd be a radical leftist. Now, I think he'd be a Democrat, but I don't think he'd be a radical
He'd be a Democrat for sure. A lot of things, that time period really intrigues me. A lot of things were going on at that time, and a lot of wickedness was taking place. And I know I had a couple of those moments of quote unquote clarity. It was a very interesting time, and a lot of the things that happen right now. John was saying something about that in terms of the programming, all the spinoffs that occurred during some of the earlier programs, and there's a lot of grounding points in the 60s of what is going on now in the country. A lot of things were planted that we're now reaping not all of them are benefits, but a lot of what we sowed in the 60s is now being reaped in the present time period. A lot of these people on these college campuses, for example, grew up on those college campuses. They're now managing as instructors, and they grew up on those college campuses as radicals in the 60s, and they went out, got the degrees, got the credentials, came back, and now they are manning the stores, teaching a lot of the classes at the universities now, and a lot of things have changed as a result of that, and they're churning out a lot of problems that are going to germinate in the future, what they're planning right now, and I don't see how, if we don't get some control of what's happening here, how this is going to improve and get better. I want to commend Mark Levine. You know, I'm kind of partial. Whenever anybody opens up the Constitution and reads from it, I have to be impressed, and it certainly pricks my attention. I sit up and listen carefully to what is being said. And Mark Levine did last night, excuse me, on his program called Life, Liberty, and Levine. Is it in that order? Life, Liberty, and Levine. I think he did a very good job last night in going into the amendments and reading it word for word. That's what I liked about it, is that, read the document. That's something that we're not doing a lot of. We're not reading the document. We got these these experts. I wish these experts would call here and say some of the things they're saying on television. They're television scholars. They better not say the things on here they're saying on TV. But I liked it last night because Mark Levine was actually reading from the Constitution, and I hope we'll do a lot more of that. Mark Levine, I commend you for that, and I hope you can get some of your colleagues, particularly on Fox, the new Fox, because the old Fox had on it Judge Andrew Napolitano. He's long gone, and they had on there, not that he was a constitutionalist, but he was a very conservative voice. I think he was. And anyway, the one that came on at 5 o'clock, and they had to get rid of him because he was stretching the credulity of the station. Not that he was wrong, but the landscape of television is not as the lens is not as wide as he was in fact taking it. That's TV is a commercialized, product, obviously, and you have to stay within the boundaries of what the those who are advertising on the networks. You have to stay within the boundaries of their comfort zone, and they don't want you going too far in any direction, because then they are losing commodity support. I mean, they're on the TV advertising in order to sell a product. And that reminds me, when they try to use Hank Aaron. Well, Hank Aaron, they had him on to try to sell television sets. And Hank Aaron should have stuck to baseball, where he was one of the great players of all times. And he was, to me, the home run champion, because he didn't use any steroids to get to the home run. I think he had 755 home runs, but he could not. They put him on there thinking because of his name, he had broken Babe Ruth's record of 714 home runs, and here was Hank Aaron that broke the record. He was pretty big at that time, and so they put him in there to take advantage of the commercial advantage of the new king, home run king, and they put him up there. And Hank Aaron was so bad. I don't think there was one TV set that flew off the shelf because of those ads that Hank Aaron made. But the point I'm trying to make is just that, you have to stay within a certain range, and you can't go too far in either direction. And a lot of people get canceled because that's really why they canceled Napolitano. I mean, Napolitano was not making any outlandish comments. His comments about the Constitution were pretty much on point. But by teaching the Constitution and then making an indictment based upon the fact we're not saying that, we would be able to handle a lot more now, given the fact of what they did last week with the president home being invaded. So we can now see a lot more into a lot of blind spots out there, because we really believe that in a lot of these institutions that we've lost faith in now. We don't have any faith in any of them. And last week was a really grounding point for a lot of people, because they thought that the FBI was on point. Not that they could verify that based on the history, but they thought that was on point. And then when they used it, this guy named Merrick Garland, wipe your brow, because we avoided a bullet, because this guy had been nominated to sit on the Supreme Court by Barack Obama. And his record was so bad that when he got before the Senate Judiciary Committee for confirmation, they couldn't confirm him because they looked at his record, and the record was so bad they had to turn it down. He got balked, as they say. But it's a good thing they didn't put him on the court, because look at what this guy represents right now. This man is probably the third most dangerous person in the country. Is he the second? I would say the second most dangerous person. Biden by far is the most dangerous person in the country right now. And he's dangerous because we have a person sitting in the White House that is cognizant of the fact he didn't win the election in 2020. And I can tell he's cognizant of the fact that he lost, because I can see into the attacks he's making on the country, which he started on day one. This country under Biden was attacked on the very first day. And this immigration that you're saying, by the way, is also evidence, because if he was in fact comfortable with the vote as it turned out, supposedly in his favor in 2020, November the 3rd of that year, then he would not be importing people coming from outside, these illegal aliens, let's call it what it is, these illegal immigrants that are being allowed to pour into the country if he had won with the constituency already in place, you would not need that, nor would you allow it to be taking place at the levels it's taking place, because they might cancel out the vote that's already in place, that already guarantee you the presidency based upon what you say occurred on November the 3rd. The mere fact that that's going on is another indication of the fact that we had a usurpation that took place on November the 3rd, 2020, and really that's where the insurrection would have taken place. Last night, Mark Levine took them on because he went to read the document in order to show how out of control our government is right now. And really, to say our government is a misnomer, because it's not our government unless we control it. It's our government only if it's government of the people, by the people, for the people. It is not that now. And you'll hear them say our democracy. And as I wrote on Facebook, when you see them putting modifiers in front of words that don't need to be modified, you can say democracy and let it stand on its own. But when you start saying our democracy and make it more specific, then you are saying something very different than when you're saying democracy without the modifier. Our democracy is not talking about the comprehensive meaning of the term democracy, which is a government in which the people decide by a majoritarian meaning of the voice of the people. This many on that side, that many on the other side, and that side has it when the majority voice is to be recognized as far as setting public policy. It's not good in terms of having majorities, in terms of having the majority controlling the instruments of power so that the minority voice can be dismissed. And that's not the kind of state, that's not what we actually have. And that's why democracy is not used. But there is a time to have a majority to speak when you're trying to weigh where the population is on given public issues. They entrust the people to come up with the solution. And when it comes down certainly to the economy, you have to trust the people in terms of decisions they make, because they make decisions by the certificates of agreement with what is being produced. Every dollar they spend, for example, is a certificate of satisfaction with a product that's on the shelf. And if those products on the shelf are not moving, then those certificates of appreciation then cause the producer to change his mind about the production of that product, and they produce some other products in its place or create some more products that have not been created. That's why you have Cocoa Pops and chocolate, corn flakes, and all the rest of it. But you have to create some new products, because the old products are, if it's not selling, you have to do something different. The market determines that. And that's those are verdicts. More people are deciding this than deciding the other thing, and the market has spoken, and they cannot pass a law telling us that they can come behind the market and make a better decision. I don't care what they say about what they did last week. I saw it. I watch television enough. I don't watch any of the programs, the comedy programs. I don't watch that on television. I watch news programs, and I'm beginning to just watch one news network. I don't mind telling you what it is. I don't watch Fox that much anymore. I missed Tucker Carlson last week. He wasn't on last week, so I just turned Fox off. He's back today, so I got to get an update of what he's going to be saying about all the things that happened in his absence, because a lot of things occurred that I would like to have heard his commentary, particularly on going into the president's home under the auspices that they're looking for espionage. The president's going to carry the nuclear weapons on his back, and he's going to become the new rocket man in the place of Kim Jong-un. He's now going to gonna sell secrets. We have to go into his house because they found there was nuclear information. There was information about the, nuclear weapons in the president's boxes. As if he boxed what's in those boxes were boxed by the president. He went around and collected everything off the wall, collected all the documents out of his files, and put them in a box. And those 40 boxes or so that were carried out of the White House, the president boxed them up individually, also while running the country. That's what they're telling people, and it tells us a lot. I wrote an article today, the second part of a 3-part series I'm doing right now. This part was called Lies, Lies, and More Lies. Because and they had a program on this past weekend, as a matter of fact, that said all governments lie. Yeah, they all lie, but I am challenged to find a government that lies more than this government lies. And I've been in some really dark places where I don't even know if they are lying so much in the other places that I've been. They just simply rule and roll over people. They don't have to lie because they don't have anything to do anything about it. The different, I wrote about this too, the difference between the rulers, and that's what they are in all of the countries. They are rulers. We're not being governed, we're being ruled.
There isn't much difference. I mean, let's face it. I go back and because I know so many people haven't heard, we got a family named Dingell, Dingell here in Michigan, who was the patriarch of the family was connected to the administration for Franklin Delano Roosevelt. That was in the 30s, all the way up to the time he died in office, all the way up to 1950s, where his son then took over and had that same seat from the time 1950s till like early to the 2000s. When he got too ill, he removed himself from his office and his wife stepped in the office. That's got to be close to 80 years of unchallenged family rule.
Yeah, we have an aristocratic class in this country, and that's one example of it. John gave a very good example of it. That's been what is that, about 80 years or so, John?
Yeah, because my brother just turned 69. He was born in 53. Okay, so that's like he was only John Dingell Jr. or whatever, the second, whatever his title was. He just died like what maybe 2018 to 2017 or something like that. And then his wife, last name I think is Sandy or something, whatever her name is. She's in office now, and she's
Debbie Dingell.
Huh?
Debbie
Dingell. Yeah. But anyway, that's ridiculous, man. I mean, and let's say Strom Thurmond had been in power for a long time. All these people had been. I mean, and there's more than one family, but I think this has got to be the most egregious. Because they just roll
really
into
it. Yeah, and we have got to look at something else here. We don't look at politicians as people that are on government assistance. I know we look at people when think about public assistance. I know we look at those that are receiving a check on welfare. And we don't see politicians in that light, but they're not producing anything. And if they're not producing anything, then they're living on the public dime. They're being paid by the public without any production as a result of it. And you cannot say what they're doing up there in the Congress, for example, there's any production taking place, because look at how they are, in fact, managing the country.
Well, welfare recipients have to live on what's given to them. These guys, who are also welfare recipients, like congressmen and senators, can up their ante. They could. Another thing is, look at the influence buying and selling they're going to be capable of doing in office, and then much more broader and open when they leave office.
Yeah, and if they would live within the salary that they're being paid, but are they willing to do that? And they're not living on the $174,000 a year that the members of the House and Senate are paid, with the Speaker getting another $40,000 to $50,000 above that. I think the Speaker's pay grade is $225,000, if I'm not mistaken. And if they were doing things that would be of benefit to the country, and their expertise was such that they are now selling the expertise for the betterment of the country, that would be one thing, but that's not what they're doing. They're going up there as a way of living off of the public dime, and what they're putting in its place is not a quality product that we're paying for. And we can see that by the fact that almost none of the policies they're putting in place serves the American people. We have got, that's, as I was saying, that's why I was impressed last night, because we've got to get back to the Constitution. There is no other way for this country to survive as an extra constitutional, quote unquote, intended republic.
Look at this. I'm going to just pull this up. Nancy Pelosi, she is a speaker right now.
She's a speaker.
Okay. Her net worth is $135 million.
John,
$135 million.
And
let that sink in.
Yeah.
Okay.
John, $135 million.
And their salary is $210,000 a year.
Okay. It's $210,000. Okay.
And I know the monthly income is $1 million a month. $1 million a month coming into this woman. And all I've ever seen her do is be in what she's been 40-some years in office in some capacity.
Mm-hmm.
She's definitely been a double dipping, triple dipping, and making inside deals and using insider trader information for stocks. Say. I mean, this woman she talks about corruption of Donald Trump and to cast aspersions at him. He had to go through an actual bank to get loans and stuff and default on loans and face the consequences. Mm-hmm. What the hell has she ever had to do?
They never produced the reason why there is, we know there's graft is because there's no product that they produce. You cannot say because they put this out in the market and there was this much of a demand for it, there's therefore this reward which they go and take to the bank. That's not what they have. They're on the public dime. And anywhere, I think Roosevelt said this, that, no, I think it must have been Truman. Truman said that anytime you have people becoming wealthy in the political domain, and they're becoming wealthy, then that is because they are in fact doing things above the level of the pay they're receiving as a politicians. There's something else going on in the background is the gist of what he was talking about. And of course, that's what's taking place. You can't get $135 million based upon a salary of $174,000. I don't care how well you've been able to invest your money. And of course, that's another part of it as well, the inside trading that goes on. And Nancy Pelosi would have been able to head off a lot of investment possibilities by knowing where the regulations are going, and they can feed that to a husband who is an investor. And this man has been remarkable in terms of how he's been able to hit the target one after the other. That's not because of any happenstance. That's because this man has inside information. And if you can't do it in baseball and football and these sports that don't have any political intent and does not go beyond the baseball field or the playing field and affect the entire country, then why do we have it in politics? But they have it in politics, and that's the way it works in Washington. Very few people are even aware that when Nancy Pelosi went to Taiwan, they always go to these countries where the countries are now in front of what amounts to a firing squad. And they go there because the country's under duress, and they make these deals because because they know they're going back to give them the aid they have in case the country comes under attack. Look at Ukraine as one example of that, but that's not the only one. Now in Ukraine, Biden's son was involved. How many persons are aware that Nancy Pelosi's son, Paul, went with her when they visited Taiwan? He went on that trip on the plane that she's riding on, the official plane, and he's dumped off away from the camera, and he's there doing what? On the sideline? No, he's there making deals. And the politicians in Taiwan understand that. if you come on an official plane, let's say with Biden, it was Air Force Two, and your son's on that plane, and you are touching down in that country, they know that you're there to make a deal. And let's be honest about it. That's one reason why Donald Trump was, in fact, impeached the first time. He's impeached twice. The reason Donald Trump was impeached the first time was because he was getting too close to the edges of this corruption between the Biden administration and this corrupt leader of Ukraine. You can put him on television you want to and have him speaking in front of Congress, but this man is corrupt.
Okay, did you see? And this is not a conjecture. Vogue magazine, a fashion magazine, went in there, did a photo shoot of he and his wife at the palace, and sitting there talking, and they're all like how the walk off here and stuff. I mean, they weren't wearing suits; they're wearing this kind of casual, but very proper. Yeah, I mean, fashion magazine going into a war zone.
Right.
Okay, it just does speak well that maybe it is not as violent, as crucial, or whatever as they're claiming to be, or this horrific tax. And if it is, they're largely exempted from it. They're being removed from it. I mean,
because if he was trying to overthrow the government of Ukraine, he'd be in Kyiv.
I mean, my God, this guy's like, I mean, it's like, it made it sound, it was a fluff piece, basically. I mean, that's something you do in a country that's stable. You don't go over there when it's supposed to be war torn.
Yeah, that's how they funnel the money out. And of course, it doesn't all go in the direction where it's been sent. There's a lot of stop-off places where people are getting their cuts along the way, and then once it arrives there, it's then being dispensed among the herd, the ones that are over the People's Republic, as they call it, but the people are not involved in it. Just like when they say our democracy here, we're not involved in that either, because that's not what they're talking about.
These are the elites talking to each other. But they can't say Cosa Nostra, this thing of ours, because that's already taken. That's what it is. And this country is their thing. I mean,
it is a Cosa Nostra.
This is very, very. I mean, let's face it. Michael Franzese, former mobster. He wrote a book on it. I'm reading it now. He shows how there's so many parallels between how our government's run and how the mob runs. There is no discernible difference.
That's right, John.
There is none.
John, that's one point that the mafia makes about the government. The mob, the Cosa Nostra, as you call it, you've been reading the Valachi papers by...
Well, not Valachi. I've been reading Franzese. And he's also got a podcast on YouTube. Yeah, you got to really watch him.
I watch him sometimes.
God, he's great because he brings us to home. I mean,
he does.
Years ago, my friend was talking to me about taxes and all the red tape you have to go through for business. And I said, "What do you got to do this for?" He said, "John, there's no difference between the mob and the government. You have to pay them. Do you have to pay them for something they had no effort, put no forth effort? You have to give them a cut. There's no difference." That's
right. Yeah. We have to look at that, John. That's a very, very important point. In that book written by what's his name?
Was it Moss or something like that? Or
Peter Moss wrote the book called The Valachi Papers. I'm talking about something else here in terms of another book, the one that came out called Organized Crime. That is, and I don't know why the name of the author escapes me right now. But the book called Organized Crime, and you would think by the big title of the book at the top, unless you read the bottom part, which is the little, put two dots there, and then you go to the bottom of it to make it more specific what the book has reference to, and the reference is the unvarnished truth about government, the unvarnished truth about government. And he's talking about organized crime, but he's not talking about the Cosa Nostra or the mob. He's talking about the mob. Well, he's talking about the mob, but another mob that you would not think is a mob, the ones that's in the capital of the country. The ones that the mob takes a second breath at the breath and length of the corruption of the government.
Thomas De
Lorenzo. Yeah, no. Thank you, John. And I read all this man's books. That book is very important, Organized Crime. That's a very important book. And I would also recommend his book called The Real Lincoln. I suggest you read that book. Also his book called Lincoln Unmasked. Anything written by De Lorenzo would be worth reading. even a book called How Capitalism Saved America, which is a very good book. I think chapter 11 that deals with this is before Gates got in there, got corrupted, where he talks how Gates got in there thinking he's just going to run an efficient company, and found out that over here is a little bit of payola required. Are we coming after your company? And when they used the antitrust laws to begin to go after Gates, he learned, and not only got on board, but became one of them, and is in some ways worse than they are. We have got Mark Levine. You did it last night. You absolutely knocked the ball out of the park, and I was elated. You had on there Leo Green and that, and Leo, I give you credit for having come from the dark side. But I like my discussion a little bit more calm than that. And so the second guest that he had on there that wrote the book called about the dwindling citizen, the decline, something about the decline. I haven't read his book yet, but I know the title of it. I've glimpsed some of the excerpts from it. He's talking about the dwindling citizenship in this country, because the citizens' rights are really, believe it or not, underneath the rights of those who are coming in the country illegally. We began to see some evidence of that when people were coming back having fought these wars, all shot up and limbs were missing, and they had to come over here and beg for aid. Now that they've been disabled, and the government wouldn't take care of those who went out there and fought the country in the name of the government, and they come back here wounded, and the wounded warriors got to go out there and beg for assistance. That was the first sign of where this country was going, and now we have the dwindling citizens in the country because the ones coming here now have more rights than the citizens have.
Years ago, I got blistered on a libertarian Facebook page because I believe in the question was that, should veterans who are wounded or received injuries or had damage done to them because of their service get lifetime medical benefits. Well, I think is pretty much an implied thing when they go in that's going to be the case.
Yeah.
And okay, I have issues. I really personally don't believe we fought a war for our freedom since the War of 1812. Okay, but
right.
That's beside the point.
He's right.
But because I don't think World War I we really need to be involved in, and that's going to anger a lot of the civics teachers and history teachers I know when I was in school. And I don't certainly think World War II we could avoid a lot of our entanglement. We might have had to fought in my opinion, FDR orchestrated events to get us drawn into the war.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, but I think that was, and I got blistered and called all kinds of names. I deleted my account there, my connection to that, because I think if we are government, we are the government. We're supposed to be. And as people, we can't say, well, yeah, you got wounded, but that was a false front or that was a ridiculous war. It doesn't matter. These people, it wasn't ridiculous. Was ridiculous about it is we allowed our government, these people, to continuously send people into harm's way when there's no real necessary reason for us to be there. Pressing necessary. It isn't. We're going to Ukraine now. I know, I guarantee it. A year down the road, we're going to be sending people to Ukraine. We're already spending billions of dollars there. Might as well send people to make sure where our money is going to go to, and spend more in the process. But that's what we're going to do.
Yes, money. These wars are basically money laundering operations, and there's a reason why. If the wars were necessary, we would have won some of the wars. Why are we fighting wars? And the wars we're fighting, we're not winning, and we continue to fight wars and not winning. If these wars need to be fought, then those wars need to be won. If the wars are fought for liberty and all the things we're saying, we're fighting for democracy, how we use those terms. If you're fighting the wars for those reasons, then you have to win the war in order for liberty and freedom to prevail, and we're not winning those wars. And so what has happened in the aftermath of it is that the conditions are worse after we we've gotten involved in the wars than it was before we got there. They didn't have our arms in Afghanistan at the beginning of this war. 20 years later, we left Afghanistan and armed the ones we've been fighting for 20 years.
Okay, remember when we started sending the missiles? I mean, those surface air missiles to knock out the choppers that are really harassing the Afghani Mujahideen back in the time of the Soviet invasion. I was questioning why we were getting involved in that. Basically, there was just getting back at the Soviet Union for their involvement in Vietnam. It was basically a pissing contest between these two countries and slapping each other with these proxy wars. That's all it was. Because, I mean, then we turned around and created one of the worst enemies the United States did attack Americans on soil, his organization. I'm talking about, what is the name? Osama bin Laden. Okay, Osama bin Laden came out of that. We created, I mean, he probably would have been a fanatic or whatever, but we had arms and stuff, and we give him connections, and he had already unlimited wealth from his own family's connections. But we always create these enemies. They're down the road. I mean, they're basically like James Bond movie creations. Basically, they're like, you can't kill them. They're always going to resurface. I mean, then we chop one head off, another one, five appear because of our actions all over the globe. We keep on doing it.
We are not fighting these wars because we believe in any of the things we're talking about. The American people believe it. Our leaders don't believe it. I believe our political leaders is a parasitic class, and they are doing that which benefits the members of that aristocratic group. We elect our elites in this country. The elites we elect then look out for the other elites, the elites. We actually elect our tyrants. Let's put it that way. The people that are running this country are tyrants. They do not believe in the Constitution. They do not believe in the traditions of the country. They don't believe in the all men are created equal, as stated in the Declaration of Independence. They don't believe in the grounding points of the country, and they do not represent them, as can be seen by what happened last week. I'm telling you that if we don't get back to some very basics in this country, and I don't think we have a lot of time, this election, I'm gonna be doing something that really is outside of my own comfort zone in some of the articles I'll be writing on Facebook, because I write every day on Facebook, and I write to be challenged on Facebook. And I must tell you, I know you're gonna say I'm bragging. I got some people that talk to me after my program is over, and they think I'm just too arrogant. I don't think it's arrogance. What I'm saying out here, quite frankly, is I'm challenging these scholars who are saying some outlandish things, and I just don't think we can let them get away with it, because we have got to return to the Constitution as in fact situated before us in the documents written by the framers of this country. They had it right. And if we think anyone is qualified to come behind them now and then go behind them and then alter that which they did, such as the Electoral College, the way we ratify treaties, and the way we choose the president in the country, and also the impeachment process they put in place, if you think that you're qualified to come behind them and place anything there instead of what was placed there by the framers, you've already changed some things that have injured the country by you changing the income tax in 1916, and also the way we elect the senators in 1913, when you did two things. The 16th Amendment was added to the Constitution, and then the 17th Amendment was added to the Constitution that year. And the 17th Amendment allowed for the popular election of senators, which is really a whoa moment here for the country, because to have the popular election of senators negated what was put in place, if I'm not mistaken, what was thought of on the 7th of June of 1787. They had put that to bed as they were arguing in the Constitutional Convention, not arguing, but trying to get the best ideas of how to create checks and balances within the within each of the branches of government. And they had, as you remember on the articles, they had a unicameral government as far as the unicameral legislative branch of government. And they knew that that was probably better attended by maybe having two houses. But the question now comes up, how are you going to populate those houses? Well, one was the first one was the popular election of the larger body. But what are you going to do about the smaller body? And the smaller body, which was the Senate, was to be represented by each state having its own sovereignty, having the same number of representatives in that particular body, because it represents the states, and each state has equal sovereignty as a unit of the United States of America. When they say we the people of the United States, that means each state united within the union, and therefore the equal players, even though they're not equal size. So one part of the legislative branch represents the disequilibrium that's caused by different numbers of people in each of the states. But the states themselves, having equanimity of commitment as a part of the unit, they would have equal representation, and therefore they put that in place. And look at how they have the check and balances intended of that, even how they are in fact situated, because the members of the Senate were to be given their positions as representatives of the states, and therefore they were elected by state legislatures. The same as intended, by the way, which was violated in 2020, which was in fact the electors are to be chosen by the particular set up by a state legislature. Look at Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the second article of the Constitution, which sets up the executive branch of government. Go read that very carefully, Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2, because that was what was being violated in this election. And I must tell you something else while we're on this point. I want to say this to you scholars also. You cannot claim that this election, some of you are trying to claim that now you're jumping off ship because now you're afraid they may start invading your homes, because everything, once you did this to Trump, everything's on the table. And now a lot of them are jumping ship, trying to now say they believe that the election in 2020 was fair, and that this man who didn't even campaign had more votes than anybody has ever gotten in the history of the election of the presidents in this country. We know that we're true in terms of getting more votes than George Washington would have gotten, although his electoral votes were unanimous, but the size of the country was different.
You know what I think of that?
But now you're talking about this man didn't even campaign and got more votes.
What I think is interesting about this whole thing about, you know, the FBI's investigation of, you know, I think unwarranted and it's a scam, you know, investigation of Trump. It has raised the awareness. I'm sitting there kind of mocking it because for years, the reason why I could never join the Republican Party, I thought they had this sickening devotion to law enforcement. I mean, that's like, it was disgusting to see. I mean, every time they almost had to like kowtow in front of somebody wearing a badge. Mm-hmm. And I now it's like they're getting this distrust for it, but it's too little too late. They've allowed these people. I mean, on the federal level, the FBI should never existed anyway, my opinion. Right. It should have never existed. I think there have been a better, they could have actually had, primarily the reason, I guess, back in the time it was created is because there's a lot of kidnappings going on and they're going from one state to another. And that's what one of the major impetuses behind creating the FBI. But I think there could have been a better resolution to that than that, creating the FBI, because it's always been abusive. The FBI has always been abusive on the American citizen. It was set up to spy on Americans. Yeah, Article 4, Section 2 deals with that in terms of if there's a crime committed in one state, the person running to another state does not, in fact, escape the penalty of the action caused in another state. And Article 4 says that any person committing a crime in one state then is subject to the consequences in the state in which crime was committed. They have to. They did that during the
in Article 4, Section 4, in terms of the Fugitive Act, the Fugitive Slave Act, as they call it, that slaves running from one part of the country to another part does not in fact excuse them of being the property of the state in which they left. That was typical of that time period. I don't condemn that because I understand the time period in which it played out, and that the inheritance of the enslavement under the British, which the framers, by the way, if you go and read it very carefully in that room that they're in, go read Madison's notes. And they're wrestling with this question. They are wrestling with how they are going to have to at some point get rid of this abomination. They recognize it for what it was, and they're discussing that room. Go look at the Connecticut plan that was brought to that convention after the Virginia plan that Madison carried there. Go look at the Connecticut plan that was brought there, and how they're wrestling with this question of what we're going to do with this institution. And what they did with the institution was clear. They wanted to, in fact, begin to make it so that it could not live long in the long run if they cut it off at the pass. You just can't, snap your finger and create magic and say, get out of here, like they're trying to do with this inflation thing. You have to process that through time, because there are community interests involved. But you can see in the discussion that they already had in their mind that they had to put something in place that allows it to, in fact, go out on its own at some point. But to recognize that within the context of the time, meanwhile, back at the ranch kind of thing, they put certain things in there in order to bring the nation together. But in bringing it together, they did not forget that they have inside of their house this elephant that was not just in the room, is in the house, the whole house. And they were putting things in place with the idea that in time they get it out of the house, and that's at the very inception of the country. I know you're going to tell me that 19, I thought it was 17, I went back and counted them again, it's 19 of the ones that were at the Constitutional Convention of the 5th or 6th that showed up, 19 of them, that's 1/3, were slave owners. And I want to tell all you critical race theory Marxists, which is what this is really about, is that if race theory was really critical, it would go in that room and see that slave owners bought into all men are created equal, because they knew that was not their institution. They were practitioners of it.
I'd like to bring this up to you. You got a good valid point there, and I will go further with it. I'd like to ask these academic Marxists, because I studied Marxism. It's basically you're supposed to have socialism gives rise to communism. Then communism, after it's in place and everybody's so changed by the transform, then there's a withering away of the state. Of all the, of the communist regimes we've seen established, that withering away never gets established. It's a collapse like it did eventually have in the Soviet Union, but it wasn't that, it wasn't like cheerfully done. And it was like, because everybody was so better educated and more enlightened, like that's what their vision was. They never had that. So when is that withering away state of a section ever going to come about? Because we never see, it's certainly not happening in China.
No, John, you're making some great points. I really, that's why I was saying at the beginning of the program, I really think if we're going to save the Republic, and that question is out now, the jury has not returned a verdict. That jury is meeting and deliberating this question. I was reading a comment by Thomas Sowell about this last weekend, where Sowell, who doesn't write that much anymore, but he had written an article, came out on the 3rd of this month. He said that the question is no longer a question about Democrats and Republicans and going from one party to the other. The question right now is a question about whether or not we've crossed over the Rubicon in this country. Have we gone past the bridge too far for us for the country to turn back to constitutional order? And that's a real question here. But I will tell you this: there's no other out for the country. And Mark Levine, I want to commend you because, and I hope you will do this. Your audience is a very large audience, and you have a pretty good grasp upon the Constitution. Probably better than some of these others that claim to be constitutional scholars at some of these universities. I don't know. I don't think you have an understanding of the impeachment process, but none of them have an understanding of that, which I'm going to teach that as we go forward, and they will remain quiet. They're not going to say anything, and I dare them to jump into this conversation. They won't do it, and I have to tell you why they won't do it. They're not qualified. I have the same degrees they have, and I don't think they have degrees in this area. I think their degrees is in what is they study court cases, and that's a different area. They didn't study the Constitution.
You study the source and how it should have been applied.
The source of it.
Yeah, and then what they did is how it worked out when the rubber met the road.
That's the difference.
The details, the compromises they came up with.
I couldn't put my finger the way you did. That's the difference right there. They went to the edges of it in terms of what's been said about it, and their expertise is in terms of how the Supreme Court has ruled. I can almost care less about that unless it's grounded in the Constitution. You'd be surprised how many of the rulings of the court had changed its mind because it was not grounded in the Constitution.
Wade, for example. I mean, Roe v. Wade.
Roe v. Wade's example, the more recent example.
Yeah, it was circumvention totally of the process by which that kind of stuff is supposed to occur.
Yeah.
Totally circumvented it.
Yeah, but look at how that has happened in so many of the other cases, the most famous of which was Brown v. Board of Education. Nothing had changed in the Constitution between the time of Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896. And then 58 years later, where the court changes its mind and rules differently in 1954, May the 17th of that year. But the court made a 180-degree change in the ruling that it made 58 years earlier in Plessy versus Ferguson. So how did that happen? The court changed his mind. It's not the document changed. So I'm not as good at the court cases as they are. But my expertise is in a different area, and they can't touch me in this area here. So you think I'm bragging. I'm not bragging, but I'm telling you this. And let these scholars prove me wrong. I'm saying it out in public. They know I'm out here. There's not a scholar in this country can touch me on the Constitution in this country, not one. And if I'm wrong, let them prove it. I'm not wrong. I know how it sounds out there, but I know where my wheelhouse is, because when I was in grad school working on my third degree, I will tell you this. In those classes, they had to be quiet. I'm just telling you the truth. You know, one guy on my post, I have a lot of respect for him. I've not met him. He's on my Facebook post quite a bit. He joined my post after he wrote something, and I challenged him on it, and he's going to find out where I was on this question. He asked me, well, what do you think about Trayvon Martin? And I told him this. I said, Trayvon Martin attacked George Zimmerman, and he got exactly, when he attacked George Zimmerman, he paid for that attack with his life. Before I knew it, he sent me a friend request.
And we got another thing. We all learned a new thing. There's a category we didn't know about of a white Hispanic.
Yeah,
that's what the press St. George said.
Yeah,
George
right.
Zimmerman was.
Yeah,
and he's actually got Jewish.
He got it right
too. So
yeah, what he's trying to see is he took me in an area where he had some knowledge and he had a position on it, and he was going to test me by something that he had some credentials in. I'm a person that I believe in the truth, and I don't take partisan positions. That's why I'm not a Democrat or Republican. I wouldn't dare call myself that. He didn't threaten me. Well, anyway, I have a lot of respect for this person. I see him on all my posts now. And last week he wrote, and I'm not bragging, this is what he wrote. You can go ahead and look at it yourself. Last week, I wrote an article, and he said in the post, he said, George Moss, you have a gift. And I'll be honest with you, I know I do. But I've known that ever since Mrs. Reed's class. And I've been in search of its expression in many different areas. And one of them was at the doctoral level at the school that nobody at the university, nobody wants to credit, because you mentioned you go to these schools and you mention in these universities, you mention Wayne State, they turn their nose up. I tell you what they will not do. When I'm in the room and they talk about this document right here, they won't turn their nose up when they go into this document, because I'm the scholar here. And I dare any scholar of the Constitution to come into this wheelhouse and say different and prove it. You're not going to do it because you can't do it. And I dare you to try. And that's all of you. I have the same degrees you have, but I earned my degrees. And one of them, I have a degree in economics too. And I would say this, you cannot pass a law against inflation. I can't believe they even tried that, but they tell the American people anything. They'll say anything to you because they don't respect you. They got a law talking about an anti-inflation law, and the same ones that created inflation want to pass a law against it. Well, if you want to pass a law against inflation, stop printing money, because the only way inflation can be created is by the expansion of the currency in the country. Okay, and I'm going to have to wrap this up. But let me tell you something. They said last month they had zero inflation. And they said that this shows you the economy is recovering. Let me tell you something, folks. The reason why you had zero inflation last month is because the energy costs went down. Go to the gas station now and look at those prices. It's $3-something, the high $3.90s possibly. But why is it $3.90? Because when the price went to $4 and $5, people stopped driving. They start riding their bicycles. They just didn't fall over like Biden did off the bike. Biden ought to be riding a tricycle. But when the price of the fuel went down because the quantity of the fuel was up, because they were not demanding it, because people were riding bicycles, they were driving less, going out the expressway. You don't see the cars packed anymore. People stopped driving. So then the price of the fuel went down because of the quantity having increased. And that then even out the rest of the costs that didn't go down. And they talking about the inflation was zero. But understand why it was like that. It was the energy that made the difference in it. But the inflation is still here at 9%. So anyway, we got to move back to the founders. I'm just telling you this, folks. Mark Levine, you were a master last night. I commend you greatly. Keep doing it. Keep reading for the Constitution. Keep reminding the people with your vast audience that we have a document here. And then maybe we'll get back to it. If we don't get back to it, this experiment is over. Okay, I got to get out of here. Want you to follow your dream. If you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.